Great. Okay, thanks everybody. It's 12:30, so we'll go ahead and get started with the webinar. Everybody is on mute. We will have time for questions at the end, plenty of time. I'm going to go through the presentation fairly quickly. So please feel free to type in questions to the chat box, which should be located at the upper right-hand corner of your screen. So if we're not able to get to all the questions today, we will get you written responses. We'll be taking down all the questions that come in. So please be sure to type those in and know that we're available for follow-up conversations as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon. My name is Dave Hodgins. My company is engaged to roll out the PACE program, leading the outreach effort, working with contractors, installers like yourselves, also with property owners, with the financial institutions, with banks, and PACE investors. So I'm pleased to have you all on today. This is our first webinar, and this will be a series. So if there were folks on your team who were not able to make it today, there will be other opportunities in the future, and we will be recording these and posting them online as well. So no need to try to memorize everything today, or if a question comes to you later, know that that will be there as a resource. So with that, we will dive in. So Property Assessed Clean Energy, PACE, it's an acronym. Property assessed is the key part. What's different about PACE is that the repayment mechanism is actually a property tax that's placed on the assessment roll for each individual project. It's a government-enabled financing program, but this is all private money that's funding these projects. So each project is funded through the sale of a bond, a taxable municipal bond, the proceeds from which are repaid as a property tax, as I mentioned. So this gives a number of interesting features, but perhaps most interestingly, because tax assessments stay with the property if it's sold, we can go, you'll see much longer terms. So in your typical lease, maybe 5, 7, maybe 10 years with PACE for solar deals, bigger mechanical projects, the financing term can be as long as 20 years. So essentially, the county, in this example of Los Angeles, is leveraging its taxing and bonding authority to effectively secure what is a private financing. Private investors are listed on the program website. We can facilitate introductions to those and encourage you to connect with them and form relationships. They purchase the bonds through a private placement. Again, the proceeds are used to fund eligible projects, and we'll go into more detail on what those are. And the property owner, the client, repays the cost of the project on their property tax bill along with their other property taxes. So they never have to see the PACE investor again. Not much changes, except they get the project installed and they'll see a new line item on their property tax bill that comes every 6 months. Now, PACE is interesting for a number of reasons, and a lot of you probably have projects where it's a good project, it maybe needed to be done, but the payback was 5, 6, 7 years. The property owner is really only looking for a 1 or 2 year payback because maybe they plan to sell the property. As I mentioned, PACE assessments stay with the property as other property taxes do. So if the building changes hands, the repayment obligation goes to the next owner, as does the equipment. So it makes sense and can overcome that issue. Often near-term capital budgets, capital availability is a challenge. These projects have an upfront cost, of course. With PACE, it's really unlimited private capital. We're talking, as I mentioned, with a number of PACE investors who are active in Los Angeles with a longer-term vision that a secondary market will develop for PACE bonds. Talking with a number of insurance companies, pension funds who are very interested in PACE as an investment option. I mentioned there tends to be a focus on a short payback, low-hanging fruit type of projects. But with PACE, again, we can go out as long as 20 years on long-lived capital improvements. And because we can fund 100% of the installed cost, if we structure the deals properly, these projects can be cash flow positive from day one, meaning that the savings that result from the project or the power generated at a reduced cost relative to retail is in excess of the incremental tax obligation that the property owner pays. So from a cash basis, they're ahead from the very beginning. The next one, the split incentive issue, is also very important, especially in non-owner user properties, meaning leased properties, which is most of your office, industrial, retail, obviously, where the tenants and the landlord's incentives are not aligned, meaning that the tenants pay the electricity bills, but the property owner's on the hook to pay for projects that are improvements to the base building, the building systems. With PACE, because the repayment obligation is a tax, generally speaking, in most leases, that tax obligation flows to the same party who would see the energy savings. So in a triple net lease scenario, as with many industrial or retail properties, the tenant is paying the electricity bills, the tenant also pays the tax bill. Therefore, the owner has the ability to fund improvements to the building, the tenant sees the savings, the tenant also repays the cost of the project over time. And if we structure it correctly, again, the tenant in this instance is better off from a cash perspective from day one. The reverse would also be true. A full service gross scenario where the tenant pays face rent and the owner pays everything, property taxes, utility bills, etc., solves the issue in that instance, and essentially everything in between. So just some examples while we're on this topic. Prologis, the world's largest industrial REIT, Simon Properties, the world's largest retail REIT, have both done projects through PACE and had no problem passing through the PACE assessment to the tenants under the existing leases. So that's a really important point. There's also an issue with longer, certain projects that are necessary to comply with building codes, et cetera, as refrigerants are being phased out, light bulbs with mercury being phased out, et cetera. So PACE can fund 100% of the cost of these projects. So really what PACE does is it takes us from the situation of, say, single measure projects. This is status quo for most commercial properties, but we can start layering in other elements to the project and fund these simultaneously, phase in the improvements over the construction schedule and finance them together, and all of a sudden you've got a very holistic project. You're maximizing the savings and getting a much more deep and holistic project done. So PACE can be a great benefit for your clients. Essentially, to recap again, can fund 100% of the installed cost, and that's important. That includes the engineering costs, permits, design, and then of course obviously labor and materials. Enables projects to be cash flow positive from day one, again because we've got this long-term, interest rates are negotiable, and if it's structured properly, the projects will be cash flow positive from the very beginning. And as I was just talking about with those examples and with Prologis and Simon Properties, it can solve the split incentive issue. And that has been a major hindrance to deeper investments in energy efficiency in the commercial sector in the past. The range of improvements that can be funded through PACE is broad. The law says only that as long as the improvements save energy or save water or generate clean power, they're financeable through PACE. So we interpret that broadly, but energy efficiency, water efficiency, on-site generation are all financeable through PACE. I'll go into some examples. But energy efficiency, your typical HVAC projects, building automation systems, but also improvements to building envelope, a cool roof or a new roof that's energy efficient, reglazing windows, improvements that have a long payback but become necessary are financeable. Also, elevator modernizations, vertical transportation does have an energy benefit, and so we're allowing that to be financed through PACE, as well as your more usual energy efficiency projects, your lighting, occupancy sensors, et cetera. But as long as the improvements can be shown to save energy or water, they're financeable through PACE. Water efficiency, some examples, but fairly self-explanatory. High efficiency fixtures, urinals, irrigation systems, cooling tower upgrades, anything that saves water that's permanently affixed to the property is financeable through PACE. And of course, distributed generation. I know we have a lot of solar installers, integrators on the phone today. Solar is financeable through PACE, as well as parking shade applications for solar, so long as it's contiguous to a building. So if it's a parking lot next to a building, we're good. We cannot do greenfield renewable energy projects if there's not a structure attached to the project, in case someone's asking that question. But we can also finance fuel cells, combined heat and power systems, solar thermal, building scale wind, to the extent that someone's interested in that, we could do it. Ideal candidates. I think this is also fairly intuitive, but high energy intense buildings, data centers, hotels, hospitals that are 24/7 operations that use lots of energy are great candidates. Many property owners have limited access to capital or limited access to capital for this. They're looking to use their borrowing capacity, their balance sheet, to fund their core business activities, and energy projects tend to compete with that money and often lose. So PACE is a way to get these projects done, 100% financing, long-term, cash flow positive, and then we're not competing for capital internally. Many buildings have equipment that's past the end of its useful life. Most buildings in the country are more than 90% of the buildings in the country are more than 25 years old. So these types of improvements become necessary. Deferred maintenance types of projects, financeable through PACE. Because PACE is a property tax, it has a senior lien on the property, and for that reason, we do have to work with banks to get their approval of PACE projects, and we've been making very good progress in that regard with a number of the larger institutions. But the reason we have low loan-to-value here is because if a property owner has sufficient equity in the property, or if they own it free and clear for that matter, then there would be no bank involved. But if there's sufficient equity in the property, there's really minimal risk to the bank, and it makes that conversation much easier. So in terms of ideal candidates, properties that are owned free and clear with low or no mortgage on them are certainly easier, but that doesn't mean that properties that do have mortgages on them are off the table. It's by no means the case, and banks are free to participate and actually directly purchase the bonds themselves, which is a unique feature of the LA open market model, which is also the same model that's being employed in San Francisco, California First, which is the statewide PACE program, which encompasses 141 cities and counties, including San Diego and Ventura, and quite a few up and down the state, and programs in Connecticut and elsewhere around the country as well. So banks have an opportunity here to proactively participate. This graphic shows, this actually needs to be updated because a number of states are considering legislation in the middle part of the country, but 28 states have passed enabling legislation just since 2009. California was first, but this concept has really gone national in a big way, very fast, and programs tend to be set up differently in different locales because the laws differ, especially state by state. But in California, in this market, LA, San Francisco, again, and California First are all on this same open market model, and their programs popping up most places that you would look. So a process question, or excuse me, a process diagram. It's a simple application process. There's two parts. The first is very basic. You can submit the applications on behalf of your clients if that's easier, or they can submit it. It takes about less than 5 minutes to fill out the online. We're transitioning to an online application. For now, it's paper, but very quick, very painless. Once the property is approved or as eligible for PACE financing, then you would be put in touch with me or one of my staff, project developer, who can help put together the rest of the package that will be needed to present for financing. And we can go into more details on follow-up calls about what all of the ancillary information is, but need to have a firm scope of work. We can connect you with PACE investors and facilitate interviews with those investors to come up with the best possible pricing and secure that financing. And once that's all submitted to the county issues the bond to that investor that the owner chose, and the notice to proceed is issued, the project moves forward, and again, the cost of the project is repaid over time as property tax. So to summarize, PACE is an interesting tool. It overcomes a number of barriers that have been persistent in the market have prevented deeper investments, specifically the longer payback projects. You can go out as far as 20 years. If you have projects that have been proposed and stalled for lack of funding, which is a great time to revisit those, please feel free to follow up with us with candidate projects that you may have, and we can discuss that. This can this can help to fund more holistic upgrades. The first slide I went through, we can fund anything that saves energy or water or generates clean power, and we think this concept really has some legs. Again, it's national in scale and is really starting to get some traction around the country. So I know that was very quick. This is the contact information for the PACE program. I would encourage folks to reach out to us with candidate projects, questions, and we can help walk through the whole process. So with that, I would open it up for some questions. Do we have any questions coming in?
We do, Dave. We've got a question coming in. And the question is maybe some comments on the website process.
Comments on the application process?
The question was maybe some comments on the website process.
Okay. Yes, I mentioned we're shifting to a web-based application process. That should be done, we hope, by the middle of this year, if not sooner. For now, we do have application forms. They are PDFs, so we can either accept hard copies. They can be emailed, faxed, whatever is the easiest way for your clients. They can be handwritten. They can be typed in. But transitioning towards a web-based form that will be a little bit easier, a little more expeditious for folks that like to use web-based applications. The website is lapace.org, as we see on the slide here, and there's some good information there as well. And again, we are available to help if there's any questions about the applications, the application process, required documentation, et cetera. But we're really striving to make this a streamlined, quick, and efficient process. Just a few notes on timing. I mentioned there are two parts to the application. The first is very quick. We turn that around within a week, usually within a couple of days, and that involves just ensuring that the property is current on its taxes, has not been behind for the last 5 years, that it's located in a participating city. In Los Angeles, we have 81 of the 88 cities within LA County are already participating through city council resolution. But the 7 remaining we can work with on a case-by-case basis, so that will not be a problem. And again, the list of cities that's participating is on the website, lapace.org. The second part of the application is the part where we need the full scope of work, so executable contracts that would be contingent on availability of financing, so we can see what the project scope is, the costs and the savings that go with it. We would want to see reservations for any utility rebates, because that helps us to see that the engineering calcs have been done and that the rebates have been applied for where there are rebates. It's important to helping the economics of these projects. And then, of course, the commitment from the PACE investor to purchase the bond. And again, the terms are negotiable per project. I'm sure people are probably wondering, what are the interest rates on these deals? The indicative pricing so far has been in the 6.5% range, which may sound high given the security that the senior lien affords. But really what we're buying here is term. This is long-term financing, 10, 15, 20-year financing, and that brings the payments down to a place where these projects can cash flow, again, from the beginning. I do think rates will come down over time, and they, of course, are negotiable, but that's the indicative pricing we're seeing thus far. We've received about 20 applications, and that is the range of pricing that we're seeing. so far. So that is essentially the application process, 2 steps. For now, it's paper-based, but we're shifting towards a web-based platform this year. It's actually underway right now. Any other questions? Okay. Another important point is that oftentimes, timing, of course, is important, and there will be different factors that may be driving a given project. Usually, the availability of some incentive, whether it's the feed-in tariff program is opening and we need to move quickly to get into that, or a rebate program is running low on funding and the reservations need to get in before that closes down. We have the flexibility with PACE to fund the entire gross project cost, not necessarily netting out the rebates. So rebates are paid after projects are completed, so we can fund the entire project cost, and the rebates, when they come in, can be applied towards the loan, towards the principal amount, and buy down that principal. There is no prepayment penalty, so there's no ding for doing things that way. Same with the investment tax credits that are so important on these renewable energy projects. We can finance the gross project cost, and the property owner can monetize the tax credits, tax deductions that may apply in the case of the EPAC 179D. That does not necessarily need to be netted out of the amount that's financed. So projects can move on their own timeline, and rebates can be applied later. Another point about timing, there's a lot of flexibility within this program. PACE can be used either as construction financing, meaning we can close the PACE financing up front and make progress payments over time as you hit your construction milestones, much like a traditional construction loan. Or PACE can be used as takeout financing for a bridge loan. So let's say there's a mortgage on a property, and the bank wants to do a construction loan to fund the project, and then a PACE investor or the bank itself could purchase a PACE bond to take out that bridge loan when the project is complete. That's also a way that we can do it, and there's some benefits to that approach as well, especially if there's a mortgage on the property. So there's a lot of flexibility within the program from a timing perspective, and to how best to tailor the deal to suit the project at hand, depending on what the driver for the project. So we're not slowing things down or working on some sort of artificial timeline that's driven by something other than the client's goals or the situation at hand.
Dave, if you take a look at the chat section, there's some other questions that have come in. If you look on your dashboard and the chat box, there's some questions there for you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm scrolling down here. I think we covered the question. Somebody asked which areas geographically does the program apply to. The list of cities is on lapace.org, but it's 81 of the 88 cities in LA County, and I would encourage you to learn about California First as well, and Green Finance SF, which is San Francisco County's PACE program. There are also programs in Western Riverside, Sacramento, basically blanketing the state. There are a few pockets that are not set up yet, but most places within the state of California, there is a PACE program. Somebody asked, please expand on how the fund disbursement process will work, particularly for high capital expense projects like solar. That's a great question. So as I mentioned, we can either close up front, and the funds would be held in escrow with the county, and the property owner would make a funds requisition request upon receipt of invoices from the contractor. So as you hit your installation milestones, the county would simply disperse funds to the property owner, and the property owner would pay the installers, the contractors. This can be done with whatever frequency is necessary. meet the project schedule. We can pay a mobilization payment up front if you need to order materials and to reimburse engineering costs incurred to date. That is fine. We're not able to pay ahead, so it can't be a flat, say, 25% mobilization fee. We're constrained from doing that. But if you've incurred costs, engineering costs, design costs, labor, or need to order materials, can quantify those and be paid for that up front, and then construction milestone payments can be made over time, much like a construction loan. Conversely, as I mentioned, the other scenario where PACE is used as takeout financing for some sort of a bridge loan, that's a slightly simpler process, and I think that's one that most on this call are familiar with. But that is another way that PACE can work. Another question, and this one comes up a lot, does participating in the PACE program impact the client's ability to take advantage of utility incentives or tax incentives? No, it doesn't. And as I mentioned, we can finance the gross project cost, the entire project cost, and then when the rebates come in after the project is installed, they can be applied towards the principal amount with no penalty. So that enables us to get the project going and not be waiting around for the rebates to come in for contractors to get paid, et cetera, or for the property owner to see the project move forward. So it does not impact your ability the client's ability, rather, to participate in any other sort of incentive programs. Somebody requested a copy of the PowerPoint. Absolutely. We'll make that available to you in PDF. And again, myself and our staff are available to assist in those meetings. Don't feel like you need to memorize all of this. It does get fairly in the weeds on the finance piece, and we're happy to support in that regard. Facilitate, again, introductions to the PACE investors. There are multiple investors that are active in LA, and we would encourage you to get farming out in the marketplace between contractors, installers, and PACE investors, so that this thing really starts to become organic, that we're giving a tool to the market that the market can use. We don't want to be in a position where we are getting involved in every single deal. It's really, the idea is that this is a tool, and then we'll give it to the professionals to use it. So we encourage those relationships to form, and materials will be available. We also have one-sheets. We have a general one-sheet that's fairly high level, another one that's more technical and gets into some of the kind of real estate business case for PACE, as well as this PowerPoint. So this will be made available to everybody. PACE, when it came out, was largely residential in focus. And someone asked, is PACE available to residential properties? It is available only to multifamily apartments of 5 units or more, and not to single-family homes, duplexes, condos. Federal regulators, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, who insure or purchase the bulk of residential mortgages, are not friendly towards PACE. There is a lawsuit pending. They're being sued by the state of California and a number of other entities because it was fairly knee-jerk the way they initially reacted to PACE. There was not the dialogue that was promised, but they don't have purview over commercial mortgages, so it's only for commercial properties. And they have to be privately owned is another point as well. So nonprofits can participate, but public facilities such as county buildings or public schools, public universities are not eligible for PACE. It has to be a commercial building. Also important is they have to be an existing building. This law is really geared, the law that enabled PACE is really geared towards retrofitting existing buildings. And the definition of what's an existing building can be hazy, I suppose, but the way we're classifying it is the building's got to have a certificate of occupancy. If it's new, you could add solar to a recently completed building, for example. that would be an existing building and adding renewable generation to it. But not for residential property. It's got to be an existing commercial property. Someone asked, how many PACE deals have we funded so far? We are still working to close our first one. We've got, as I mentioned, about 20 applications in the queue right now, in conversations with multiple mortgage lenders right now, introducing the program to them. That is really the main kind of time-consuming piece of this, but the good thing is that we're laying groundwork with the major players, major commercial mortgage lenders, and helping them to develop internal processes to expedite review and to actually participate actively. So talking with Wells Fargo, Chase, East West Bank, Prudential, and a number of others who are looking at this and actually seeing value in participating. So we haven't closed anything yet, but we've really just launched this in December, essentially. So I think we're making great progress considering that we've only really been up and running for about 6 weeks or so. As soon as we do have transactions closed, we will certainly be publicizing that and doing case studies. We recognize certainly as the most important tool that we have is precedent. How did it work? Who did it? But again, I think two great examples of big names are Prologis and Simon Properties. Those are major players in the commercial real estate industry that have utilized this program, and there are numerous examples around the country where banks have agreed to the PACE assessment being placed on the property. So it is doable. It's taking some time on these early ones, but I'm optimistic that we're going to get some deals closed this quarter. Someone asked, does a detached tracking system qualify as part of the PACE program? I'll answer that two ways. All the improvements have to be permanently affixed. The legal definition of permanently affixed to the property means as by screws or nails. So, and we are allowing lamps to be financed through PACE, even though those technically could be unscrewed. But personal property, so copy machines, furniture, anything like that, not financeable through PACE. As long as it's permanently affixed, it is financeable. Roof-mounted solar is considered affixed. So this, most projects that we would think of would be financeable. If it were a handheld device or something that could easily just be unclipped, then that would not be financeable. However, building automation systems, energy management systems, etc., controls that are attached to the property that are monitoring system performance would be financeable. They just need to be permanently affixed. That's a very good question. Someone asked another good question, very nuts and bolts. How is the PACE bond actually repaid through the County of LA? It's fairly simple. It's just collected along with the other property taxes that the property owner pays every March and September. So it'll appear as a new line item. One wrinkle with that is that the first payment, and this is an artifact of the law and the specific type of bonds that we're talking about here, the first payment, which is in March, is interest only. The second payment is principal and interest. Level payments on an annual basis, fully amortizing over the term of the loan, or of the PACE assessment. So up to 20 years, level payments, each one will be slightly different amount, but on an annual basis, they're level payments. Another important point, timing-wise, and this is a fairly interesting benefit with PACE, is that because it's a property tax, there is a deadline by which new assessments have to be placed on the property in order to appear on the next year's bill, and that deadline is July 1st. So if we were to close a PACE deal today, the first payment would not be due, the first interest-only payment would not be due until March of 2014. So that gives time between now and March of 2014 to get the project installed, commissioned, and start actually seeing savings before a payment is even due, which is interesting. If we closed on July 2nd, one day after the July 1st cutoff, the first payment would not be due until March of 2015. So you would have an even longer period to construct, install the project, accrue savings, and be prepared to make the tax payment when it comes due. So it works very much the same as the property tax, exactly the same in fact. When the county collects the tax, they peel off the PACE part, put it in a designated account, and pay the PACE investor. So the property owner doesn't have to do anything except pay their property taxes as they normally do. The county handles the rest in the background. Another good question, are there any project costs that are excluded from this? This is something that has come up. What we're saying is that we can fund the installed cost, the total installed cost of the project. Now, of course, there have to be some brackets on that, but again, we can fund engineering costs, permit costs, labor, materials, etc., ancillary costs that are necessary to install the improvements. Say we're going from a split DX system to a central plant. There would need to be ducting, piping, etc., lots of ancillary changes. All of that would be financeable. I know we have a lot of solar installers on the call. Structural work to reinforce a roof to be able to bear the weight of a solar system is financeable. The kinds of costs that would not be financeable and where we would have to draw a line is if we got drywall dust on the carpet, can't rip up the carpet and finance that through PACE. So we have to put brackets on it so that this is in the spirit of the law. So the costs, there has to be a direct nexus to the cost and the saving of energy or the generation of clean energy or saving water. So as long as there's a nexus between the costs and that outcome, it's financeable. Someone asked about ground-mounted solar. Again, that is financeable so long as it's adjacent to a building. It could not be a solar project out in the middle of the desert with nothing around it. There are other financing options for those projects, but as long as it's adjacent to or attached to a building, we can finance it through PACE. Another important question, what are the fees? What are the transaction costs involved with this? From the program side, the fees are fairly minimal. We're looking at a fee of between $600 and $900 for a title search. Actually, before I go into that list, I should say all of the fees are able to be rolled in. They're not due in cash at closing. It can be rolled into the principal amount and financed with the rest of the project. So that's an important point to note. LA County is not making any money off of this program. They're only covering their costs. So the county is not taking a spread. They're only recouping any legal costs that are involved, which we estimate to be between $5,000 and $10,000 per project. So we do want to see projects that are large enough to absorb those costs. The other application costs are very minimal. $250 processing fee, an annual administrative fee of $100 a year. Again, that can be rolled into the financing as well. The PACE investors, the bond investors, are going to charge some fees, obviously some points on the deal. Those are negotiable and again also rolled in to the principal amount and financed with the rest. So fees are relatively low. I think from the program side you can expect between $5,000 and $15,000 on the high end, which implies larger projects are better. Anything really under $150,000 would be considered fairly small. Not to say it's not doable, and those costs will come down over time as of course the program gets up and running and we shift to this streamlined web-based application process, and the documents become more and more standardized. The bond documents are already drafted, but again, since we're still working on our pipeline here and working towards our first closing, these first few deals will involve some tweaks to those transaction documents, etc. So fees will come down over time. Somebody asked which cities are not participating. I would encourage you to go to the website However, I would say that the cities that are not participating are the gateway cities primarily. Bell and the surrounding cities are not currently participating in the program. If you have a project that's in a city that's not on our list, that's not a problem, but just contact us and we can reach out to those cities. This came up recently with City of Industry. Good opportunities there. Actually, industry is part of it. I mean, excuse me, I meant commerce. But on a project basis, if there's an actual project in the city that's not currently on the list, we can deal with that. The county has drafted a sample resolution that any city can simply insert the name of their city into, get it on the city council agenda, and easily opt into the program. So it's fairly painless for cities to opt in if they haven't already, and we've got most of them involved. Somebody asked what type of help is available from the program to help project developers who work with building owners. I myself am available. We have a team of project developers who can accompany you to meetings, give presentations, participate in conference calls, walk through decks like this, or go into greater depth. Happy to give perspectives on what's going on elsewhere, who's done this, facilitate conversations with our PACE investors, can also support in conversations with the banks, with the existing lenders. That's where I'm spending most of my time these days, is working with our borrowers and their mortgage lenders to come to a win-win around this. So know that we are available to assist and very interested in helping introduce the program to your customers. And but before we do that, what we like to do is sit down with you, understand what is your client base, what are the projects that you're working on, what are proposals that you've put out but have stalled for lack of funding, where PACE might be a tool. We can assist in running some numbers, some pro forma numbers, to see, based on some assumptions, indicative pricing and term that we've been seeing, how would this project pencil out, and can help to put together the business case that you would present to the customer. So we can help throughout the entire process and encourage you to make use of the support that's available. So please do contact us, and we'd love to learn more about projects that you have in the queue or that maybe have stalled, and put together a strategy for bringing those back to life. Somebody asked in some detail for some detail on projects that have already been completed. As I mentioned, we're still working towards our first closing here in LA, but I can give examples of the types of projects that are coming in, as well as some examples of projects that have been closed elsewhere. To continue on the Prologis example, they recently began a retrofit of their headquarters in San Francisco, very holistic project, lighting upgrades, HVAC upgrades, controls, as well as a roof-mounted solar array. So they kind of hit all the boxes. Simon Properties, the other major owner I mentioned, did a cool roof for one of their enclosed malls up in Sonoma County, solar array on another project. We're working on a number now that are efficiency as well as distributed generation. So some very holistic projects that include elevators, window film, as well as HVAC upgrades and solar. Large and small, we've seen applications as large as $3.8 million, I think is our biggest one so far. A few others in the seven-figure range, and some as small as $60,000. And we are working on those, and every project, every application that comes in gives us another opportunity to engage with the banks, and they pay more and more attention the more applications we get. And that's actually an important point. For the initial application, there's no fee. And again, it only takes about 5 minutes to complete. And that just verifies that the property itself is eligible for PACE. It's not guaranteeing financing, but what it does is it opens up the conversation, and it also kind of reserves a place in line and enables us to approach the bank with a project that's real, that's not theoretical. So we really encourage you, after we've kind of pre-qualified some of these projects, are they a fit, to get those initial applications in. Again, there's no fee. You can submit them on behalf of your clients if that's an easier way to do things, and we can get the conversation going. That's really what we want to do, and once we get our first one, this thing is really going to snowball. Somebody asked, is this an LA County only program? What I'm speaking to today is this concept of the open market, where we've got a diversity of investors as well as banks participating, and where the rates are negotiable. That is true in LA, in San Francisco, in the California First program. Other programs are also adopting this model, such as the state of Connecticut, a number of programs in Michigan, even Florida. So what I'm describing here today does apply in a lot of markets. We're moving towards greater uniformity, but at least the major markets in California all work the same way. And if anyone wants to be connected with those other programs, please do contact us or check their website. San Francisco is Green Finance SF, and California First is the statewide program that also covers San Diego and Ventura and a number of other communities. Somebody asked a question about materials. Again, we do have brochures available as well as this PowerPoint. So we will make those available to everybody on the registration list here today. And again, we're happy to help follow up. If there are other materials that would be helpful to have, please let us know. We want to make sure we're giving you the information that you need to communicate this effectively. So we really want to make sure that we're providing that. Someone asked a question about multifamily, and it's worth revisiting. 5 units or more with a single landlord is considered commercial property in the mortgage world. Anything 4 units or fewer, or where there's separate owners for each unit within the building, that's a condo technically and not eligible for PACE. So single owner, 5 stories, 5 units or more is eligible for PACE. Lots of good questions. Someone asked a question of a solar tracking system which is not attached to the building. Would that be financeable through PACE? Any improvements have to be attached to the building. The way that attached is defined is as by screws or nails. So if the tracking device is screwed to the roof or otherwise attached to the roof, it would be financeable. If it's not, if it's just kind of loose, sitting on a stand of some sort, which I wouldn't envision being how it would be installed anyway, that would not be financeable. That would be personal property. Any other questions? These are very good questions. Please don't hesitate, and we will, if you think of something later, again, please do contact us, and we will get you written responses promptly. Wonderful. Well, seeing no more questions, I think we can end a little bit early. If anything occurs to you, or if you'd like to request any materials, we will make this PowerPoint available, as well as the technical one sheet and the general one sheet. And again, I myself and my team are available to support, sit down with you, discuss your portfolio of projects, clients, where might be a fit, and help put together a strategy for where and how to introduce this. So please do reach out. Someone, one other question just came in. Ground-mounted solar, I said, does qualify. A parking lot structure would work. So yes, as long as it's next to a building, and the building owner is responsible for paying the property taxes, we can do that. So again, any other questions that come in, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're very glad that you joined us this afternoon. Again, this will be recorded. We'll be doing these in the future. So please do let others on your teams know, and we're happy to, we can hold as many as 100 people on these webinars. So we encourage you all to get your teams involved and follow up with us with any questions. So thanks, everybody. With that, we'll end about 10 minutes early, and we can all get back to work. Thanks again.